Welcome to this week's edition of Ask an MS Expert. I'm John Strum, and I'm the host of the Real Talk MS podcast. Each week, Real Talk MS reaches thousands of people in more than 100 countries around the world with the news that people affected by MS need to know. My wife, Jean, lived with progressive MS for 23 years, so I've had a front row seat experiencing all the ways that MS can impact a family. I'm a past member of the International Progressive MS Alliance Scientific Steering Committee. Currently, I'm a district activist leader and trustee for the National MS Society, and I chair the Society's California Government Relations Advisory Committee. The MS Society's Ask an MS Expert webcast is designed to give us a place for the MS community to connect and to connect you with MS experts who are ready to answer your questions on the topics that impact people living with MS every day. Please feel free to post your comments and questions on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitch. MS navigators are online throughout today's program, answering those questions and connecting you to resources. No two people have the exact same MS symptoms, and as many of you know, each person's symptoms can change or fluctuate over time. Many MS symptoms are referred to as invisible symptoms, which means no matter the challenges that they may present to the person living with MS, people around that person can't see what they're dealing with. Joining us today to discuss some common invisible symptoms of MS and how to manage them is Kathy Costello. Kathy is a former Associate Vice President at the National MS Society, and she was one of the original team members who developed the Ask an MS Expert program. Today, Kathy's Vice President of Programs at Can Do MS, an organization that delivers health and wellness education programs to help families living with MS thrive. As an adult nurse practitioner, Kathy specialized in MS care in academic comprehensive care centers for more than 25 years. It's great seeing you again, Kathy. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much, John. And thank you to the National MS Society for having me. I'm so happy that this program has continued. We started this in March of 2020, and here we are. And this has just been a fantastic resource for everybody affected by MS. And I have to tell you, that photo of me, wow, it's amazing what 10 years and a pandemic can do to a person to change them. But thanks for that. It was a nice memory.
Oh, no worries. I still often use my nursery school graduation photo myself when I'm appearing publicly.
Absolutely.
You know, the majority of people living with MS have symptoms that aren't apparent to others. Can you talk about some of the most common invisible symptoms of MS?
Sure, happy to. And I would honestly say that most of the symptoms that people experience are invisible to others until they are at a level or they're so severe that they emerge and people can see them. So it's kind of that iceberg effect, right? What people generally see in the beginning is just the tip of the iceberg, and there's a whole lot going on under the surface. But in terms of the common invisible symptoms, probably the most common is fatigue. People experience that and often suffer in silence. Mood disorders such as depression or anxiety, cognitive issues, or our ability to think and process and remember things. Pain, both the kind that comes from the nerves and the kind that comes from the musculoskeletal system. Bowel and bladder problems, sexual dysfunction, and changes in vision. Any one of these could be apparent and people might be able to see them, but by and large, people live with these in silence, and they really affect their life. They affect how they feel about themselves, their self-esteem, their confidence, their ability to continue to live a full life, because it's hard to break through to people to help them understand. And so a spiral develops where people start to feel worse and worse and are able to do less and less when these symptoms are not addressed and managed.
Well, I want to get into some of those specific symptoms in just a moment, but I'm wondering, do we know why some people experience more visible symptoms like mobility or speech difficulties, and others experience these invisible symptoms?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it really has to do with the real estate in the central nervous system, right? So the brain, the optic nerves, and the spinal cord are where the action is. And in MS, that's where the action is. But it doesn't happen across the entire central nervous system. It's haphazard. So different pathways are affected and can be affected at different times. And whatever that pathway happens to control is what you're going to see emerge as a symptom. Plus, we also know that there's lots and lots, thousands and thousands and thousands of connections. And when a few of them are altered, we may not see so much. But when more of them become altered, the person may be experiencing more symptoms. Symptoms come as part of inflammation, meaning part of a new relapse or new activity in their MS. And when that activity settles down, people may be left with some residual, meaning they may have 50% recovery or 80% recovery. And then over time, they may lose a little ground in those areas. So a visual problem might start to get worse, or bowel and bladder symptoms may potentially get worse.
So how does someone know if one of these invisible symptoms is from MS or from something else?
And that's a dilemma, because a lot of these symptoms can have different sources. A great example is fatigue. So 80% of people with MS experience MS fatigue, but fatigue can also come from infections, a sleep disorder, restless leg syndrome, anemia, lots of different things. Thyroid issues can all also produce fatigue. So it's important to raise the issue, meaning I'm having a new symptom. Describe what it is so that your MS provider can start to sort through it and try and really zero in on what actually is the cause. Is it MS or is it one of these other issues?
We heard from Colin, and I think he described, unfortunately, a common scenario. Colin wrote, "My family seems to assume that if they can't see it, then there isn't anything wrong with me." Tell me, what's the best way to explain MS to others?
Right. So, it's difficult for anybody to understand what they can't see. Or at the very least, it's difficult to understand the impact of the unseen symptom, right? They may believe you're having it, but they can't quite grasp what that impact is for you. And I think that sometimes family members or friends, people that are close to you, are a little reluctant to learn about MS. They don't read the information that you provide. They don't attend programs sometimes. They don't go to your appointments with you. And I think they might have a little bit of denial that, if they deny that it's there, maybe it's actually not there. Well, of course, that's not true. But I think the people around you are also on a learning curve. They're trying to grasp what's happening and how that impacts you, the person with MS, but how does it impact them too? Because as much as there's some guilt around this, your loved ones experience MS in their way. So it's important for them to know what's going on. So to be honest and be direct. And sometimes we experience an awful lot of frustration and even anger when someone doesn't get it. But I assure you that anger and frustration will not make the person get it. That you can't bully them into understanding it, even though you feel like, my God, let me just shake you so that you understand this. I think it's about being clear and trying to develop a vivid description that the person can relate to help them understand what you're experiencing.
We heard from Erica, who wrote in saying that she disclosed her MS to a group of her friends, and their response was, "But you look so good." Erica's afraid that her friends don't believe her. This is a pretty common scenario. What advice do you have for people like Erica?
Yeah, that's right. People want you to be okay. And when you look good, you must be okay, right? Well, unfortunately, in MS, that's obviously not the case. People don't need to know everything, but they do need you to be honest and they need you to be direct so that they can actually begin to understand and they can be most helpful. Most people want to help. They want to be the best help possible, but they don't understand. So it's important that, for example, if you're describing a new diagnosis of MS, making that understandable, and probably the easiest way to do that is the whole frayed wire analogy, so that if you have a frayed wire that's important to the light in the room, sometimes the light doesn't go on. It's unexpected sometimes, but it doesn't always work. And in MS, we look at the damage to the nerve fibers like that frayed wire. And so sometimes things work, but sometimes they don't. And it's not always easy to predict. And so that when you give that vivid description, sometimes that helps people with their understanding. Having said that, understanding doesn't happen overnight. It takes our patience, our time, and our persistence to help people understand. And at the same time, trying to be kind with the time it takes them to come on board and to really understand.
Let's get into some of these specific and invisible symptoms. As you mentioned just a moment ago, fatigue occurs in about 80% of the people living with MS, and fatigue can significantly interfere with your ability to function at home or at work. It may be the most prominent symptom in someone who otherwise has minimal activity limitations. We heard from Alicia, and Alicia tells us she's frustrated with her wife who doesn't seem to understand Alicia's fatigue. When she tells her that she's feeling really tired, Alicia's wife usually responds with, "Well, I'm tired too. I've been really busy with work." Can you talk a little bit about how MS fatigue differs from just being tired?
Yeah, no, I thank you, Alicia, for this question. It's a really important one because it is hard to describe fatigue and understand how it's different, because we all do experience fatigue, every one of us, from the activities we participate in when we're sick. There's lots of reasons why we have fatigue, but MS fatigue, what we call primary MS fatigue, is unique. So it's described by people as overwhelming, either emotionally, cognitively, physically, or all three. So at the moment that the fatigue occurs, people are unable to continue. They must stop. So it's overwhelming. It often occurs at the same time each day. It is not relieved by rest and sleep. It is worsened by exposure to heat or when someone is sick. For example, someone who has a fever, for example, may not be able to move at all. They may be immobilized with their fatigue because of their temperature going up. So there are good days and bad days that can occur. And sometimes people take an inventory when they wake up in the morning, like, okay, is this going to be a good day or is this going to be a bad day? Because if you're living with MS, you often know your own personal signals to know if today's going to be a good day with fatigue or if it's going to be a bad day with fatigue or some other symptoms. The other thing that I often encourage people to do is tell a story about fatigue and how it's different for them living with MS and someone who just is having a busy day. So I often tell the spoon story. And the spoon story was actually developed by a woman who had lupus. Her name was Christine Miserandino. I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly, but in any case, it goes like this. So you who don't have MS, start your day with 5 spoons worth of energy. So each spoon represents a unit of energy. I have MS and I only start my day with 3 because the disease process has already robbed me of 2 spoons. But we have things that we have to do today. And each of those activities takes a spoon. So we have to go to work. There's a spoon. We have to work all day. There's another spoon. We have to get home and make dinner. There's another. We may have to help our children with their homework. Well, that's 4 spoons. Oh, but I only had 3. So I've run out of gas before we even got to the end of the day because I just don't have that amount of energy. It's really visual, particularly if you hold up the spoons. Each person holds their spoon and each person puts them down when they've used it. And sometimes for people with MS, they have to use an extra spoon for the same activity. So now the deficit is even greater. And the last part of that is tonight, when the person who doesn't have MS gets a good night's sleep, all their spoons are restored. So the next day, they have all 5 again. But for the person with MS, sleep is not going to restore those spoons. So they're going to start off the next day also with a deficit. So that kind of a vivid description can help people really get what someone's experiencing.
Dave told us that his family members, his friends, and coworkers sometimes misinterpret his fatigue and think he's depressed or maybe not trying hard enough. This kind of constant doubt makes Dave feel terrible about himself, and he ends up questioning his own symptoms. Do you have any suggestions for how Dave can get the support he needs while keeping his self-esteem intact?
Yeah, this is a particular challenge with invisible symptoms, because when others don't get it, you begin to have self-doubt. You begin to have loss of confidence. Your mood can change and you start to feel more depressed. You start to do even less, which increases the symptoms that you're experiencing and may even bring on additional issues. The less we do, the less we're able to do, right? So this is a spiral that can happen with invisible symptoms. And ultimately, quality of life can be really impaired, and your ability to kind of pick yourself up, that resilience that we all have, can really become diminished. So sometimes being able to share those feelings with others can help validate the fact that you're not alone. So sharing them, first of all, with your healthcare provider, who, if they have experience in MS, can help you and your loved one understand what the meaning is behind these symptoms, and that you're not crazy, that this is real, and that what you're experiencing is really hard to manage through. And that can help both people. Sometimes support groups are helpful. They're not for everybody, and they're often not something that a newly diagnosed person is ready for. But there are types of programs that all of the organizations have that can help you understand the different symptoms that can be experienced. Some have small group activities where you can get support from other people who are walking down the same path that you are. So I think it's that connection that people can develop with others. It's learning from their healthcare provider, but also being honest with what the symptoms are with their loved one can really help people with their understanding, but it can also help that individual restore their confidence and to help elevate their mood and kind of give them that feeling that they can do more than they thought.
Earlier, I heard you mention depression as one of the invisible symptoms. At least 50% of the people with MS report significant symptoms that are associated with depression. Can you talk about what the signs of depression are?
Yeah, there's actually quite a few signs that point to depression. And unfortunately, some of them can get really mixed up with other symptoms that are common in MS. For example, one of the early symptoms can be difficulty concentrating, remembering details, making decisions. Well, golly, that could be associated with cognitive dysfunction in MS. So a symptom that needs to be kind of sorted through. Increased fatigue, and then symptoms of guilt or hopelessness, sadness that persists day after day. A sense of pessimism, that nothing is going to get better. When people start experiencing those kinds of symptoms, those are big red flags that it's probably past the time where you need to let somebody know. Losing interest in things that are pleasurable, that you always found made you happy. Suddenly you're not even interested in trying them anymore. Sometimes digestive problems pop up. So physiological symptoms can be associated with your mood. And ultimately, untreated, this is where we start to see symptoms of self-harm, thinking about self-harm, or even thinking about suicide. And these can happen when the symptoms of depression are not addressed.
So if someone is feeling like they may be depressed, what should they do about it? And how might they talk to their loved ones about it?
Right. So I think if someone's experiencing any of the symptoms that I just mentioned, it's time to not only tell their loved ones, but it's really time to talk to their healthcare provider, primary care, MS provider, all of the above. I think it's important to reach out. No one knows unless you say something. And this is so treatable. It's treatable through therapy. It's treatable with medication and therapy. There are ways that this is successfully treated and people can feel better. But it's not going to happen if someone doesn't reach out and say something. And if someone really is feeling hopeless and those thoughts of harm have kind of been creeping in, reach out to a 24-hour hotline, Suicide Prevention Lifeline. And I'm going to go ahead and give you the number. So it's 1-800-273-8255. 8255. It's something to put somewhere where you can find it all the time, because if those feelings creep up, there's always 24 hours a day somebody that you can reach out and speak to. It's really important to talk to your loved one. Let them know what you're feeling and what you're experiencing. They probably are seeing it manifest in some of those things that I just mentioned, that they're not really sure that that's relative to your mood. But if you start to talk about how you're just feeling down and blue and feeling like you're crying a lot, or you just don't want to do things, those are big red flags to do something.
Pain is a common symptom in MS that can limit someone's ability to do the things that they really enjoy. Pain's a very personal experience. It's another symptom that someone can feel, but others can't see. What types of pain do people with MS experience?
Yeah, so there's two main types of pain in MS. And I will say the hardest thing about pain is what you mentioned. It's very personal. And so my perception of my pain is going to be different than your perception of your pain, if you're having any, right? So, and we have to believe that the person that's talking about their pain, that's what it is. It is what it is. It is what they are telling us. And in MS, it comes in two big forms. One is neuropathic and one is musculoskeletal. So the neuropathic pain is coming from the nervous system, right? So that's the frayed wire, if you will. So damage and inflammation can cause those feelings of burning pain or prickly pain or searing pain, the pain that just will not stop. And it gets worse as the day goes along and it gets to nightfall and you want to just rest and get away from the pain, and it becomes amplified. The less stimuli is around you, the bigger the pain becomes. And it can be just relentless. Musculoskeletal pain, while it's different, can also be relentless. So, for example, if someone has weakness in their leg, they have to change how they walk. They have to change because otherwise they're going to trip and they may fall. So they develop a limp, right? So they're trying to swing that weak leg so that they don't trip. When you do that, you get pain in your hip and you get pain in your back, and that's musculoskeletal pain. Or you have tightness in your muscles called spasticity, and it pulls on the joints. And people can get low back pain, hip pain, leg pain, ankles, where those muscles are likely to become really tight. The muscles that keep us upright get tight. And you can develop spasms or cramps, which can be remarkably painful and can occur more at night than they do during the day. Great. Just when you need to get sleep so you can combat your fatigue, that's not going to happen. So those are the two main groups of pain that people can experience in MS.
We heard from Sophia, who said she experiences chronic pain. She's explained it to her doctor, but so far, nothing's really helped. She's wondering if there are pain clinics or certain specialists she could see to better treat her pain.
That's a great question. And it really calls up what's needed to treat these kinds of symptoms. And it's generally not one thing. And it's often not the first thing. It may not even be the second thing that's tried, because it's personal and it's unique to you. And finding a treatment that is just as unique and just as effective for your unique pain takes time, which is unbelievably frustrating. But I think that when an intervention is not working, it's time to talk about it. It's time to have that conversation to say, you know, you put me on this medication and we've increased the dose and I'm sleepy, but I'm not getting any relief from my pain. What else can we try? And there's lots of different interventions that can be tried, both for neuropathic pain, but also for musculoskeletal pain. Things like different medications or combinations of medications, physical therapy, cooling techniques sometimes can relieve some neuropathic pain. If you're seated most of the day, making sure that your posture is good and there's no pressure areas, because these are things that can produce pain and can be relieved just by changing the position or with a different type of seating. So I think it's looking at what the pain is, looking at what you've already done, and then searching for those different types of interventions that might be able to be combined to make your pain relief optimal.
Changes in cognitive function are often associated with MS. You mentioned them just a few moments ago. In fact, it's been estimated that between 40 and 65% of the people with MS experience some degree of cognitive change over the course of the disease. What are some signs of cognitive changes?
So commonly, when people are experiencing cognitive problems in MS, there's a few things that emerge at the top of the list. And one of them is called processing speed. So how fast information can be processed in your brain so that you can, for example, respond in a conversation. Sometimes by the time you're ready to respond and you've got it all worked out, the conversation is 10 subjects beyond you, and it's terribly frustrating. And you wind up withdrawing from those kinds of conversations because you can't keep up. Another common problem is short-term memory. What did you say? Who is that person? What was that phone number? I know there was a message that I was supposed to give you today, and I just can't come up with it. And the harder you try to come up with it, the further away it gets from you. So I think that those are two big problems. Attention is problematic, particularly if there's a lot of different things going on, then keeping your attention focused on the task at hand can be difficult. Multitasking. Many times people find that when they have MS, they need to be able to do things one, then the next, then the next, then the next. Whereas in the past, they were able to keep bunches of balls up in the air at the same time. There's other things, but those to me are the ones that seem to rise to the top that affect a lot of people when they have cognitive problems.
Now, although the invisible symptoms we just talked about are all different, are there consistent strategies to best treat and manage invisible symptoms collectively?
Yeah, so I think I kind of alluded to this a little bit, but I think that any symptom of MS requires a really thorough assessment, because that's where you're going to try and get at the source of the problem, right? If it's a new exacerbation that's causing the symptoms, perhaps a course of steroids might be beneficial, right? If it's an ongoing symptom that's getting worse, is it MS? Is it something else making it worse? So that assessment piece becomes really important. Then it's the different treatment modalities that are available. And let's start with one and then add, maybe subtract that one, add another, and try things that aren't medicine, right? There's a lot of lifestyle interventions that can be beneficial in managing symptoms. For example, exercise, believe it or not, can be useful in managing fatigue. Many people find it counterintuitive, but on the other hand, it really can be beneficial. So putting together maybe some pharmaceutical intervention with lifestyle intervention, rehabilitation strategies, different amounts of each of these are going to become the optimal solution for each person.
Kathy, can you tell us about Can Do MS and the upcoming programs about invisible symptoms that I know you have planned?
Yeah, thanks so much. Of course, I welcome the opportunity to talk about Can Do MS. As you mentioned earlier, we're a nonprofit organization, and we provide health and wellness programs, also support and resources for people with MS, but we also have separate programs for support partners. So for those family members that are trying to figure all this out, there are some specific programs for those folks that also provide support for them and address the issues they're having. So we have on-demand programs, and we also have live and virtual. And in terms of those invisible symptoms, we actually have 4 upcoming programs that are in person, but they also have that hybrid portion where people can, if they're not comfortable with meeting in person, they can join in a virtual space online using Zoom, for example. And we have programs coming up in Boston in conjunction with Comprehensive Centers for MS. So that will be in conjunction with the Elliott Lewis Center, in Cleveland with the Cleveland Clinic, in Baltimore with the Johns Hopkins MS Center, and in Atlanta with the Shepherd Center, which is a rehabilitation center that has a specialty in MS. And so we're really tapping in to the expertise in these areas to help people understand these symptoms and develop strategies. There'll be a little bit of small group work where people can talk about what works for them. And we've had a few of them already earlier this year, and the participants have found them remarkably helpful. So I know that they'll be on our website, which is cando-ms.org. And the National MS Society has been kind enough to also advertise these. And John, I know that you are also kind enough to do the same on your Real Talk MS, and I couldn't be more appreciative.
Well, you already know I'm a huge fan of the work that Can Do MS does, and I'm always happy to remind my listeners where to find those programs. I want to thank you for sharing some great information today. Unfortunately, if you're living with MS, the odds are you will deal with one or more invisible symptoms, and you will deal with trying to explain those invisible symptoms to other people. So this has been really helpful. I'm going to ask you now to share the top 3 takeaways that you'd like our viewers to remember.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So number 1, let your MS provider know when you are experiencing new or worsening symptoms so that they can be assessed and a treatment plan can be developed between the 2 of you. Help your loved ones understand by creating vivid descriptions that they can relate to so that they can understand and be the best support possible for you. And also it will help them in their understanding of what MS means, not only to you, but also to them. And finally, be persistent. The first intervention may not be the final solution. Be persistent. There will be a solution to help you with your symptoms. But again, it may not be the first or the second, so keep at it.
Well, I want to thank everyone who submitted their questions, and I want to thank you for being with us today, Kathy.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Before we close, I want to remind you that the National MS Society's MS Navigator team is your best partner when it comes to connecting you to the very best information and resources on living with MS. You can reach an MS Navigator by phone, email, or through the Society's website by chat. For information and resources on MS, please visit the Society's website. You'll find research updates and news, information on connection programs like self-help groups and MS Friends. You'll find ways to get involved yourself, and you'll hear about upcoming events that are taking place near you. Remember, you can connect with the National MS Society and others affected by MS on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And I hope you'll join me every week on the Real Talk MS podcast, where I continue the conversation that we start here. You'll find Real Talk MS at realtalkms.com, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. I'd like to thank Kathy Costello for joining us today. Please remember that a recording of this webinar will be available at the Society's website at nationalmssociety.org/MSexpert, as well as on Facebook and YouTube. I hope you'll join us at this same time for next week's edition of Ask an MS Expert. You can always find our upcoming program topics on the National MS Society's website. And now I have a favor to ask each of you. Getting your feedback on today's webcast is important. So if you're watching on Facebook Live, you'll see a link to a survey pinned to the comments section. And on YouTube, you'll find that link in the program description. Completing the survey makes a real difference. The information you provide helps us continuously improve, and it helps shape future programs. The survey takes just 1 minute, so I hope you'll take a minute to fill it out. On behalf of Kathy Costello and the National MS Society, I want to thank you once again for joining us. Please stay safe and make healthy choices.